Okay, today we are on our second lesson of probability, and we're going to be looking at simple probability. So, an event in probability is a set of outcomes of an experiment An event has a probability. So events are what we are going to be working with for the majority of the day. An experiment is a situation that involves probability. An outcome is a possible result of a probability experiment. A sample space is the set of all the outcomes possible of a probability experiment. So, if you need some extra time to take down those vocabulary words, make sure you do so now, because these are important words that you need to know in order to be successful in probability. So, we're going to be looking at 3 different ways today of looking at probability, of calculating probability, making predictions, and identifying the number of outcomes. So when we're calculating probability, we calculate the total number of outcomes. You calculate the number of outcomes for one specific event. Write a fraction with the event outcomes as the numerator and the total number of outcomes as the denominator. Write a simplified fraction, decimal, or percent, depending on what the question is asking for. So these are the 3 different types of outcomes or ways that we can write a probability. So we can do it as a simplified fraction, as a decimal, or as a percent. Those are the 3 ways that we can write out a probability. Making predictions. So this is what we do a lot when we are working with probability. We are going to be making predictions about outcomes. So we write the theoretical probability as a fraction in simplest form. So you're going to be writing out the theoretical probability as a fraction in simplest form. Then we multiply the fraction by the number of trials. So we multiply by the number of trials. Then, as always with fractions, we simplify if necessary. So we'll be working with making predictions today. So let's talk about this. So if we are rolling a dice, and we want to roll a 5. So the probability of rolling a 5, there's 1 5 out of 6 sides. So our probability of rolling a 5 is 1/6. So how many times would we most likely roll a 5 out of 30 rolls? So we're going to take 1/6 times 30. So remember, we put our fraction, our whole number over a 1, so we get 30 out of over 6, which equals 5 times. So most likely, if we rolled a dice 30 times, we would get a 5 times. That's making predictions. Identifying the number of outcomes. To identify the total possible number of outcomes for each event. For example, there are 6 possible outcomes when rolling a number cube and 2 for rolling or flipping a coin. Because rolling a number cube, you can get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or 6. And flipping a coin, you can get heads or tails. So if we add or multiply the number of outcomes for each event to find the total number of outcomes. So the total number of outcomes for rolling a number cube and flipping a coin would be 12, because we take 6 times 12, or 6 times 2, which equals 12. The total number of outcomes for picking a piece of candy out of a jar with 4 red, 10 blue, 2 yellow pieces, and yellow pieces. The answer would be 16, because we would add those all together. The reason we multiply when we're flipping a coin and rolling a number cube is because we have to account for each outcome. So we can roll a 1. We can roll a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or 6 and then get a heads. Or we can roll a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or 6 and then get a tails. So we have a total of 12 different outcomes. Because we can get a 1 and a heads, a 2 and a heads, a 3 and a heads, a 4 and a heads, a 5 and a heads, a 6 and a heads. Or we can get a 1 and a tails, a 2 and a tails, a 3 and a tails, a 4 and a tails, a 5 and a tails, and a 6 and a tails. So that is why we have to multiply, because we're doing 2 different experiments. But where we're drawing a piece out of candy out of a jar, we only have all those pieces that are in the jar. So we add the number of pieces together. Let's practice some. What would be the probability of landing on a tails when you toss a coin? So tossing a coin, you have a total of 2 outcomes, and getting a tails would be one of the 2. So you have a 1/2 chance, which we could write as 1/2, 0.5, or 50% chance of getting a tails. What is the probability of rolling a 2 or a 3 on a 6-sided number cube? So they already tell us in the problem that our total number of outcomes is 6, and we are looking for a 2 or a 3. So our favorable outcomes would be 2, because there's 2 favorable outcomes. So we simplify, and we get 1/3, which could be written as 0.3 repeated, or about 33%. Number 3. What is the probability of spinning a number greater than 2 on a 6-sectional spinner numbered 1 through 6? So once again, we have 6 outcomes, and we have to think, what are our favorable outcomes? Or our event outcomes. So our event outcomes would be 4, 3, 4, 5, or 6. So we have a total of 4 event outcomes. So we need to divide by 2. So we get 2/3, which equals 0.6 repeated, or about 67%. There are 30 students in the class. 18 are girls. What is the problem that a student who's randomly selected is a boy? So we know that there's a total of 30 students, so we have 30 total outcomes, and we want to know how many boys are in the class. So they tell us there's 18 girls, so we have to do some math. We have to take 30 minus 18 to get 12. So there's 12 boys. So we divide, 3 goes into both of them. So we get 4/10, which equals 2/5. 2/5 equals 0.4, which equals 40%. Okay, now I'm going to have you work through these 4 kind of on your own, and then I will go over them. So you spin a 6-section spinner numbered 1 through 6. What is the probability of getting a 4? So your total number of outcomes is 6. And there is 1 4 on your spinner, so you have 1 6 as your probability. You spin a 6-sectional spinner numbered 1 through 6. What is the probability of spinning a 4 and then a 1? So you would do 1 6 times 1 6, because that's a 2-step experiment. So you have to multiply. So you get 1 over 36. So you get 1/36. Number 3, you spin a 6-sectional spinner numbered 1 through 6. What is the probability of spinning an even number or a 2? So your total number of outcomes is 6. Your event is 2, 4, or 6. Because 2 is an even number, so it's going to fall even into our even number category. So we have 3 outcomes out of 6, or 1/2. And number 4 You spin a 6-sectional spinner numbered 1 through 6. What is the probability of spinning a 7? Your probability would be 0 or impossible because there is no 7 on the spinner. So on today's assignment, you're going to be practicing your simple probability using these steps. So make sure you have your notes handy when you're working on your homework, because you're going to be calculating probabilities, making steps, and identifying total number of outcomes.